Later. All right, here we are. Welcome to another edition of Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haines, and I'm joined today by Aaron Sanchez. Aaron, I was lucky enough to catch you on Instagram, which is where I do all my best work. And I saw a post of you jumping, and with a little bit of inquiry, got some feedback from you on your stats, what you jumped, where you were going, all that stuff, which we'll cover here in a second. And so welcome. How you doing this Saturday?
I'm good. Happy to be here. How are you?
I'm good, man. So what year are you in this year at your new college?
Yeah, this is my third year, so I'm a junior. It's going to be my third season. Excited to get started. Preseason's going well. I feel healthy, feel ready to jump high, so excited to
Awesome.
get after it.
And share with our listeners again here on our podcast, Raise the Bar. Where are you going to college, and where did you come from originally?
Yeah, so right now I'm at East Stroudsburg University. It's in Pennsylvania on the East Coast. It's a Division II school in the PSAC conference, Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference. And I come from PA, Southeast PA. It's little small town, Collegeville. It's
Steeler
about
fan?
I'm a Eagles fan. It's about
Eagles fan.
45,
Okay,
45
one or
minutes
the
away
other,
from
right?
Philadelphia. So yeah, Eagles fan. But yep, small town. I started high jump in I think 10th grade, so my sophomore year. Started track in 8th grade, but never did high jump until 10th grade. And my PR in high school was 6 foot. I got up to pretty much recruited myself. No one was coming after me.
Right.
Yeah, found a spot here and with my coach Karen Gata, that's my high jump coach. She's great. Um, Improved my PR 7 inches almost. So
Awesome.
yep, through 2 seasons. So hoping to improve it more this year.
Outstanding. So this brings up a concept I find fascinating, is the growth and then the lack of growth of some athletes when they leave high school. I personally have seen jumpers that were well trained, jumping pretty high heights in high school, 6'8", 6'10", 7-footers, that go off to college and never get any better, just kind of languish around at those heights or drop, and I witnessed that myself. I was a 6'3", 180-pound jumper. Played football in high school. I played free safety. My mom was always worried that I would die because I was so skinny. As it turned out, 180 pounds wasn't really that skinny when it came to high jumpers. It's almost on the heavier side. There's a lot of people that I ended up competing against, teammates of mine at UCLA, that were taller and lighter. It took me a long time to figure that thing out. So I promptly went from 6'3", 180 as a 210 jumper in high school to 6'3", 195, put on 15 pounds and jumped 205 my freshman year. Jumped worse, and wasn't until I had an epiphany that at that weight I had to get really, really strong in order to get off the ground, and started squatting over 400 pounds. And when I did that, I was able to jump high again, but it was a battle, so there's all kinds of stories out there of the really good athlete that plateaus, and then there's stories also about athletes like yourself who maybe got going down the road of jumping maturity a little bit later, and now I'm watching your approaches, and I see good approach speed and good lean back angle and takeoff and nice rotation over the bar, and I'm like, this kid was only jumping 6'1" in high school. Like, it doesn't even look right. So how does that work in your estimation there, Aaron? What's the secret? How can we bottle this up and get it out?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's no real secret. I think maybe something that plays a bigger role than people would expect is just like confidence as an athlete and the mental approach to high jump, like there's a huge that's a huge variable to consider when you always have like certain heights, or at least in my experience, you have certain heights where you might get up to a certain height every meet, but then you can't clear it. And
Right.
it's like once you clear it one time, now it's like automatic.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that that's like a physical adaptation or a form correction that is allowing you to get there. I think it's more just like, I've done this before. I've cleared it. I know
Mhm.
that I'm able to do it. So you are standing back at the start of your approach saying like, I got this.
Right.
Instead of saying, I've never done this before. This would
Yeah.
be a PR for me. Um, so having that confidence back there, it's not like you can't, maybe you could train it. Like there's definitely like mental practices and techniques that you can use to calm yourself down and give yourself some confidence, but it's really just something that we all battle with. For me, like just going back to the physical traits, like I'm undersized, so everyone that I'm competing against, I mean not everyone, but I'm 5'11", and
Yeah.
I'm like a bigger dude. Like I'm 180 myself.
Hmm.
um and I usually cut down to like one between 170 and 175, but it's still like I'm a
Yeah.
bigger dude in terms of who I'm competing against. Like there's always the tall, lanky kids that I'm going up against. So, but yeah, to your point about getting strong, like yeah, I'm getting strong. Like I squat 405 for three, a lot of cleans, like cleaning over 225, um, stuff like that. So that ratio helps
Absolutely.
of like mass to strength. But in terms of like how to progress, just going back to that topic, how there's like some kids that just never really progress in college. It could be there's so much that it could be. Like it
Yeah.
could be a mental thing, it could be an environmental thing where maybe at the college that they're at, they're not they're not eating what they're supposed to be eating. They don't have access to facilities that could benefit to them. There's so much,
Yeah.
even outside of just like coaching. Like obviously the coaching and like improving your form, that's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
But there's so much outside of that that it could be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I liked hearing what you said too. When you, excuse me, when you threw out the word variable, that's what I've been putting this on my post recently because I tell the kids this. I go and I say kids. I've got seniors, I've got elite athletes, and I've got also some youngsters too. So I kind of run in the gamut, but mostly I'm dealing with high school kids,
Yeah.
and I tell them, I said, this is kind of our lab, quote unquote. We're in the lab, and
Mhm.
my favorite Disney movies was the Emperor's New Groove, and she goes, "We're quote unquote in the lab," and I'm like, "Yeah, in Yzma's lab," but it's like I treat it as a lab session in that I have a lot of drills and I have a lot of ideas and I have a lot of pretty preconceived notions that are backed by a lot of both you know number data and also just empirical data of stuff that
Mhm.
I've watched for so many years. If I'm like, most people say, "What's the secret to high jump?" I go, "You got to get a knee drive. Do you
Yeah.
drive your knee up and leave it up there? Okay, we're good to go. Speed, I can turn it into lift, that kind of thing. But at the same time, there's a gamut of different styles. Double arm, single arm. I've started seeing some girls with both arms up at takeoff. I've seen all kinds of different things, what I would call hybrids, and you know, uh, luckily everybody's got to take off on one leg. I haven't seen anybody in quite a while with the drive knee up and over being on the outside, which would be like the old straddle. Everybody's on the
Yeah, yeah.
inside. So the knee drive up and across is pretty universal to everything. But it's like, again, I just tell the kids, I go, "Hey, we're in the lab today, man. We're trying to figure out what it is that you do really, really well, and then accentuate that and figure out what your weaknesses are, and then we'll start attacking those, big time, and see if we can't get this whole thing, where you're running faster and taking off farther out and blah blah blah. So you mentioned variables, and that's just like, to me, that I sense a kindred spirit, someone who's sitting back and watching and analyzing and is able to say, hey, what are my strengths? You said, well, I tell the kids this sometimes too. I've got a couple girls that I recruited this year that they're not giants, but they're like 5'8", 5'9". I said, hey, you got my whole magic checklist. I go, you're tall, you're fast, you're light, and you're flexible. I go, I can't think of any better gifts for you. I can accentuate those now, but I can't coach height. I can't coach strength to weight ratio and all that. I mean, I can make you stronger, but sometimes some people, when you're coaching to get stronger, they start putting on weight, and you're like, okay, wait, can we do one without the other? So, it's interesting that you have all these different things going. You, on the other hand, at 5'11", you're thinking, well, this guy's only 5'11", 180, 190, 180, you said. And I'm like, well, Stephen Holm was 5'11" and a half,
Yeah.
7'11" and a half, and
Yeah.
I tell the kids that sometimes. I say, hey, the magic checklist doesn't always work out. There's all kinds of real tall, skinny people that can't get off the ground, So
Yeah, for sure.
it's pretty crazy how it all works.
Yeah. What Holm, he jumped like 240 something, right?
243. Yeah, he
Yeah.
jumped 243, 7'11" and a half. He's officially tied with Franklin Jacobs, who I believe was from your part of the country. I think Franklin Jacobs is originally from, I want to say, Pennsylvania or Philadelphia or something like that. I could be wrong, but Franklin Jacobs was 5'7" and a half and jumped 7'7" and a half. So they both hold the distinction of being the two high jumpers that have jumped the highest over their own heads.
Yeah. Crazy
Well, I think
statistic.
anything over your own head qualifies you as a high jumper, in my estimation. And once you start getting significantly over your own head, then you're really getting pretty good. And it sounds, I don't know, underhanded to say someone who doesn't jump as high as they are is not a high jumper. That's kind of snooty, I guess. But yeah, I remember thinking that when I was watching Dietmar Mogenberg. And Dietmar, if you happen to be listening to the podcast, please forgive me because I've changed my ways. At the time in 1984, when I was in college at UCLA, I was thinking, gosh, this guy, he's 6'8" 3/4. I go, he's jumping 7'8" 3/4. So he's only jumping a foot over his own head. And I'm like, and I didn't understand single armers at that time. I was a pure double arm power guy. And I would say most Americans are still double arm power guys. So you get someone every once in a while that sneaks in there that's a little faster and gets that arm up and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I'd gone for years. I mean, this 30 years of coaching now where I had not coached anybody to do the single. And it wasn't that I was trying to steer them away from it. It was almost like, I don't know what happens with American sports when they come in, but if they play volleyball, they jump with two arms. If they play basketball, a lot of time they still jump with two arms, so it's like, there's times when I'd have them run up and I go, well, try this. And it just never seems to go that way, So anyway, I didn't understand it and I wasn't pushing for it. And then these last few years, man, I've just been watching a lot on Instagram. Like I said, I dropped out of the loop for a long time. When I was coaching in high school, I started coaching football and I wasn't really pursuing track and field that much. And I didn't, I remember somebody said, did you watch Barshim? I'm like, who's Barshim? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And the first time I saw him jump, I was like, oh my God, this guy does everything that I was taught to do very well. I'm like, he's fast. He leans back, he drives his knee up, he waits, rides his knee, and then he lays out way later. And this guy's like the perfect, person for me, tall and thin. I'm like, how can you build anybody any better than this guy? He looks like he's 6'4" and like 140 pounds, dripping wet. He's fast, and he seems to be fearless. And once he does go into a position, he's unbelievably flexible. I'm like, guy almost lands on his hands and feet like a cat. So, but I started seeing a proliferation of single armers, mostly the Europeans, the women, and then some of the guys. Brandon Stark, I love watching him from Australia. Great single armor. Tam Berry, obviously gold medalist and fantastic single armor. You just start seeing more and more. And I'm like, what is it about the single arm? Like, what are the advantages? And the things that I started seeing was, well, way higher attack speeds and, lean back into the curve and a real high center of mass, since that one arm is way up a lot of times at takeoff. So I started pushing this last year. I said, you know what? I'm just going to jump out of my own little self-imposed box. and see if I can't get someone to be a single armor, And I had one kid that ended up taking third in CIF out here, which is our version of, the local stuff I'm sure you guys do in Pennsylvania. So we got our CIF is our kind of our local finals. Then they go to the Masters meet, which is a bigger local meet. And then if they can make it through that one, they're at state.
Yeah.
He ended up taking third at the one and then went to the other one. Unfortunately, he rolled his ankle during practice. So he wasn't completely on for that one, but he ended up almost making 6-6, and his 6-6 jump, it wiggled and fell, and he would have won if he'd have made that one. So he came in third, but he literally almost won, and he was the first guy. And we made that transition in the last 2 months of the season. Like his dad and his dad was a 7-2 jumper in college, and we're looking at him. I said, what do you think about him, just running off the ground with a single? I go, well, I can never teach him how to use two arms anyway. He doesn't seem to really want to reach back and, do all that. And I said, yeah, he could just run off the ground. He's real tall and thin, And so Caden just started doing it, and he just took to it. It was like letting him out of the box,
Yeah.
Like, see it. It was like, oh man, I feel like I'm really coming off the ground this way, And I go, well, and now my big teaching move was, okay, how Bondarenko and Drown just kind of reach for their heels a little bit, just do that, And it was like steal it, I go, here's this tall, skinny kid that's got, can tomahawk dunk a basketball. I'm like, hey, this works pretty good. So it's amazing that all the different styles. I love watching it. So getting back to you, sorry, we're just rambling on. About you, Aaron, what is I know your goals, you told me, but why don't you tell everybody else what is the achievement goals you have in line for yourself this next couple of years, this year particularly, and by the time you're a senior and all that?
Yeah. So this year, I mean, my PR right now is 2 meters flat. I think my school record is around 210. Whatever it's 6'10 3/4 is. Not great with metric, but so I want to get that
6'10 3/4.
Cool. So yeah, 210 is the goal by outdoor. So indoor, I'm just hoping to place well in my conference. I have a 4th place and a 6th place finish. Kind of want a top 3. I want to get a medal. Obviously I'm going in trying to win. But wait until I medal before I make first goal.
Right.
So yeah, I want to place top 3 in the conference, and then outdoor, I'm hoping to at least approach my school record. But by the time I'm out of here, I got a whole nother two seasons after this year. So definitely by the time I'm out of here, I want to get my school record. Definitely want to get medals and maybe win the conference, and then hopefully I can go to D2 nationals before I'm out of here.
So you academically you're a junior, but as far as competition goes, are you only a sophomore, or is that?
No, I'm actually a semester ahead academically, but this is just my 3rd year, so I've had 2 indoor seasons, 2 outdoor seasons, and I have 2 more left, the ones that are coming up this year. Okay. And then next year I'll compete as well.
Yeah, my brain's always jumping ahead too. I'm like, oh yeah, that's this year. Okay, so
yeah.
Now what level of college are you at? Is it you said D2? Is it a D2, D3?
Yeah, Division 2.
Division 2. Okay, so
yeah,
I've got a tiny experience with the smaller schools. As a UCLA guy, which I get the big picture stuff, but I didn't even know much about the smaller college thing. And I started coaching at Vanguard University out here. It's in Costa Mesa in Southern California, and they're an NAIA school, so it's down lower than D3. But they're going to switch in the next 2 years. They want to jump up, surprisingly, 2 levels. They're going to go to D2. So we're going to be going against some of the powerhouses out here, like Azusa Pacific.
And, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
We've jumped against them. Right? I actually want to talk about this a little bit. I think the viewers would, like maybe appreciate this. Mm-hmm. The difference in like division with track is it's there, but at the best of the best, like if you take the best D2 guys and put them up against the best D1, best D3, right, they're all very similar. So like we just had Eli Kosiba from Grand Valley State go to the Pan Ams. He was there with Dontavius Hill from Auburn. But the whole Grand Valley State high jump squad, like they just got a guy from NAIA that was national champ. And so they have like two or three, they might have like three guys over 7'2" this year
Right.
from D2. And it's different with other sports. Like I would agree that in general, D1, you have more talented, bigger, stronger dudes.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it is. Like they get recruited to D1.
Sure.
But with track, it's like our performance is numerical. Like
Yeah.
if you get a 7'4" high jumper from D2, just because he's D2, that doesn't,
Right.
discount his 7'4". Like
Exactly.
that's still a crazy high jumper. So, but yeah, we're D2 and we have good comp. And even in my conference, like my conference isn't one of the weaker ones in our division. I think our best high jumper, he jumps 210, but we have like a 210, 209, and 207, and then it drops a little bit to like 202. And then there's a bunch of 2 meter guys. But if you stack that up against D1, on average, it's not like great, but we're still not like terrible.
No, I hear you. I had wasn't an eye opener. It was I went the first year I was at Vanguard. My female jumper, Juliana Holmes, she got all the way to nationals. So I got to travel with. We went to Alabama. Did the whole thing, Gulf Shores. I'd never been to Alabama before, so that was nice. And we showed up at this meet, and there were three guys there that I'd already done podcasts with. Michaels Millslegel, Shandon Reitzel was there, and there was one other guy. Actually, there was one guy that I tried to get on a podcast, both him and his coach, and I was never able to get back with him. So, but I had talked with both of those guys, and they're 7'2", 7'1", 7'2" high jumpers.
Yeah.
When you see Shandon, you're like, oh my gosh, I think Shandon should be jumping 7'6", 7'7". He's got perfect build, another tall, super light one. And then, so yeah, the talent levels, like you said, you get up to the higher levels there. It rolled me back 20 years. I was used to coach at the Orange Coast College out here, which is a junior college. And we had one state meet final where there were three guys that cleared 7'2" at the state meet here in California for JCs, and I was like, that's as good as a Pac-10 final right there, for sure.
Yeah.
And, not everybody's made to go to a 4-year school. So some guys, put in their 2 years and that's going to be it, for them, or some of them can springboard obviously on from there, and many do. But yeah, for the high jump in particular, but like you said, it's all just straight numbers. It doesn't matter where you're going to school. You're jumping at a high level. You can qualify for the trials. You can, I had another, was it Robert Atwater, who jumped 7'2.5" his first year at the NAIA or D2 school level or whatever, and that was the B standard for the Olympics. So he got to go to the trials and jump, and I was so jealous. I'm like, dude, I jumped 222 in college, but back when back in the day when I was before you were born, when I was jumping in college, the qualifying was 225 or 6. I think it was started at 225 when I was a sophomore. It was 7'4.5" in 84. And then it kept climbing. I think it was like 226, 227 after that, and then there didn't used to be a B standard. It was just A that I knew about. So it was like 7'5" or nothing. So if you didn't jump over that, you weren't going. So, now they don't have the numbers. I don't know what it is in the last 10 or 15 or 20 years. I think we lose a lot of guys to basketball, money. It's always money. So the best athletes are getting attracted to the higher money sports. And now that even includes, I say even, but soccer, and what else can you play? You make a lot more money than track. Volleyball, I don't know. Can beach volleyball players make money?
I'm not sure.
We used to have a pro beach circuit when I was in college. That was big. Now I don't know if it's as big. For a while there, it was, you could make money on the pro volleyball circuit. I don't know if it's the same, but
yeah. That's definitely the case. So like, think about all the NBA players, NFL players that if they had, 4 to 6 years of practice, like
right,
could be like top talent guys.
Oh yeah. Well,
So,
Reggie Bush, he ran track out here. Maurice Jones-Drew, great running back in the NFL for years, played with Jacksonville. he was a track athlete, in high school. A lot of the guys do both. And then, their colleges, for whatever reason now, everybody's so jealous of their players, and everything's just got so much money. You kind of understand it, but I think the football coaches that have a track background still have an advantage because they can let their guys go and learn and get better and faster. Some of the great football legends in the pros were great college track athletes. Bo Jackson for Auburn ran the 100. Who was the other guy? Roger Craig, one of my 49ers, was a high hurdler at Nebraska, and there's just story after story. You start finding these guys' backgrounds. And Russ Francis, great tight end who just died flying a plane. He went to University of Oregon, and he played for the Patriots and the Niners. He was a great high school and college javelin thrower. So there's tons of athletes out there, and it used to be a little bit easier, but there's quite a few guys. Marquise Godwin, I think, he played for the
Marquise
49ers.
Goodwin, yeah,
Goodwin. He was a long jumper in the Olympics, and played football. Still is,
Yep.
So.
Even Tyreek Hill, crazy fast.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that guy, he's freakishly fast. All right,
or like DK,
right,
he just ran against all the pros, didn't do too bad.
right. Oh my gosh, that guy, and he's so big too.
Yeah, I know. It reminds me, speaking about how big they are, we've been talking about a little bit before the single armors and then like the types of builds that athletes have. A guy that you had on the podcast, I follow him, Jordan Wessner.
Mm-hmm.
He's like just an outcast.
Right.
Like he's jumping
6'3",
7'2"
like
as a single armor weighing 225. Like,
right.
Oh my God. That's like insane. Some of his dunks too, like dunk from the free throw line. It's crazy.
He's dunking past the free throw line now. And I'm actually using what he does as a training tool, because I was thinking about that when I started thinking about the single arm. If you see somebody dribbling, and they're dribbling, these guys are such great athletes and they have huge hands. Mm-hmm. So I remember Dr. J when I was a kid, he would dribble, catch with the same hand and just put it up overhead and then jump, right? It wasn't to jump. Yeah. It was kind of up first and then take off. And I'm like, that's it. That's the single arm right there. Yep. And I go, he's already 6'6" and probably weighs like 195 or who knows, probably heavier than that, but not much. And so you get a tall guy like that, all stretched out, light and fast, and they hit vertical, and you're like, there you go. So I've got my kids carrying little, we find them all the time. These are the bane of my existence is at the high school level, the other sports are always in my way. So soccer practice is out in the middle of the track, and they're always kicking balls into the end zone where we're trying to jump, right? And then the same thing happens. We get out of the soccer realm and we get into lacrosse, and those little lacrosse balls are zinging by you. I mean, I haven't been hit yet. I'm waiting.
Your high school, my high school had like a net.
Yeah. Like around they do. Sometimes they go over the net. And, yes. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I keep finding those little things. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to use these and pretend it's a basketball. I'm just hold this, run up, get that arm up, and see if you can jump up and tap the crossbar, with it or whatever. So I'm developing a system. I just to pimp from my own podcasts, but to hit on a subject that you might find interesting. I just did one with Ron Lee. His son Sean Lee was he's out here on the coast. He jumped 7'3" in high school, and so he jumped 7'3". He won state twice. He went off to UCLA, and his dad trained him. I jumped against Ron, and he was a 7'2" guy, and he had 2 state champs, his son and another guy, Harrison Steed. And his ideas are all speed and kind of outside the box thinking when it comes to power, especially for the taller guys, right? Because Ron's 6'4", and his son, when he was breaking all these age records, Sean broke age records from 10 to 14. These like national age records. He was jumping out of the building, and then he grew. He was really not that tall, but he shot up almost like another foot in high school. And all of a sudden he was 6'8", jumping 7'3", right? So we talked about a lot of these things that you and I are talking about. What are the variables? How do you train for them? A lot of single leg work, is coming up now. I'm seeing like my traditional thoughts still, I got to break myself. I'm like, okay, I want to start with two-legged power stuff. So I'm like, okay, squats, cleans,
Right.
and all that. And at the same time, I'm watching some of these feeds where people are standing on one leg and doing this, like almost a snatch or a hang. It's actually more of a snatch overhead with a lunge, with one step up onto a box. And I'm like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I like that. That's perfect for a double armor driving their arms up. They're driving the other knee up and they're stepping forward and holding a lunge at the top. I'm like, that's all single leg stuff,
Right.
So I'm watching that and I'm going, yeah, I need to be doing more of this stuff. And, holding a hex bar and doing single leg, deadlift jumps, basically, start with the double leg deadlift,
Right.
and gradually go to singles, and then gradually make them less and less shallow, and then start going and getting air. Right. So, and I look at that now, I'm getting old, man, that, I remember when I was squatting 400 pounds, my back, it puts a lot of strain. You got to have a really good core when you're sitting 400 pounds on your shoulders.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking, it would have been nicer to just reach my hands down and grab onto a bar and just do the deadlifts. I mean, it's the same thing with your knees, right? Pretty much the same. So I'm like, it's a different loading of the spine, but I can't.
Yeah, a little bit more like lower back.
Yeah, it's got to be less compression, right? And I'm not doing anything with my arms, just like I'm not doing anything with my arms when I do squats. To use my arms, I got to do hang cleans, or whatever. So anyway, it's a good listen. We just did that one the other day too. I got him on I'd been talking with him about it for a long time, and he's real quiet. So sometimes he and I won't talk for months, and I'm like, oh man, I forgot to. Hey Ron, let's do one, man. Let's get this. And he even texted me back, and he goes, "Hey, that was kind of fun." I'm like, okay, now we got to do another one, man, because he's definitely an outside the box kind of an engineer type.
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we do at this time of the year, like before the season, we are still doing a bunch of double leg stuff. Like it's pretty much just squat, hang clean, power clean. We'll do cleans from the floor, and we'll do hex bar jumps. We don't do single leg stuff yet. We have started doing B stance jumps, which is like one foot in front of the other.
Yeah,
kind of like a kickstand.
I like those.
Yeah, no, those are good. But
It's like the Adro, right? Like you're stepping up onto a box.
It's actually not even up to a box. But we actually, I think we start doing them a little bit closer to the season, and in season we'll do like step ups. But I honestly wish we did more.
Yeah.
Like I wish we did more single leg, like barbell step ups, like
yes,
like that. Where
barbell
I see like
step up's a good
guy like Brandon Stark. Like Brandon Stark does them all the time. You can see on his Instagram, like that's one of like the major exercises that he does. But yeah, we do a lot of double leg stuff, and we do a lot of like calf and tib raises.
Well, that's smart. That's just
that's especially smart. Actually, can we talk about like shin splints and knee pain for high jumpers? Because golly, it's like crippling for me, at least. Like I mean, it's on and off for me. So if I take care of it, or if I'm like smart and not an idiot and get ahead of it and don't let it like get worse, then I'm usually fine. But in the past, like I've had really bad jumper's knee to the point where like I couldn't really, I just had to call practice, like take a week off or something like that. Like it got really bad. And then shin splints, like the lower inside of my shin just like hurts even when running. Like I'm at doing my approach, and I like don't even feel confident to take off. Like
I call that what do we call it? Jumping on razor blades. I was like, and that's almost always a result of overtraining. So when you bring that up, I get, into storytelling mode, but I had it all the way through high school. Shin splints would always get worse and worse as the season went on, right?
Yep.
We were jumping foolishly, because I look back now, I literally think I cost myself about at least 5 years of good jumping by overtraining. Because when I got to be 28 years old, I was tired. I didn't like lifting that much anymore. I got to a place in my training where I would jump once every 10 days on the average. I wouldn't do high jump technique work that often. I still did some plyos, I still lifted, I still did my running, I worked a little bit on flexibility, but I wasn't training as often by then, because I was both physically starting to burn out. I think it takes a mental toll but it was always, shins and knees and, so it was always overtraining. So in high school, I would jump Monday, Tuesday. We had a meet on Thursday, so we would go a little lighter on Wednesdays. I remember Wednesdays would be run throughs and back overs. Then we would jump on Thursday again, this time with adrenaline. Then Friday would be a day off because Saturday was probably some kind of invitational on the weekend.
Yeah.
So I'm getting 2 days, Monday, Tuesday. Then I get 2 heavier days, Thursday, Saturday. And then I get a day off again. And then on Monday, we're back in there. So no wonder my shins were hamburger, So it's like, and then I remember my junior year, so my sophomore year, for whatever reason, they didn't have me on varsity, which I still couldn't figure out because I was jumping 6'2" as a sophomore, and they had me frosh soft, and I was jumping as high as a couple of the varsity guys. I could never figure that one out, but it didn't matter. I wouldn't have gone anywhere that year anyway. My junior year, I started jumping 6'8", but towards the end of the season, my legs, my shins were killing me. But the coach gave us Easter break off. And I was like, oh, that, and I literally took a week. I didn't do a thing for a week, and when we came back, I was not magically recovered, but I felt a lot better. And I never made the connection between, it's one thing to get a magical gift, but it's the other thing where you just feel guilty if you're not working. You feel guilty if you're not jumping or training. So you're like, you don't realize that you can add by subtracting, and maybe do more weight work, or maybe do more this or that, or you could even visualize through your workouts or something. And then, so that happened all the way through high school. I got a couple of times where I got gifted a week. I strained my hamstring the tiniest bit at league finals my senior year. Coach did the same thing. The next week, that was league finals. I ended up winning. And then he goes, okay, you get the next week off, because I told him about my hamstring was bugging me a little bit. And I rested the whole week. So the next week we went to CIF prelims, and I jumped 6'7" on my first jump. I went like 6'5", 6'7", done. You're in. I'm like, great. 2 jumps. Okay. And so that was the same kind of thing, that little bit of rest, that basically your body said, give this to me or I'm going to rebel more. I'm going to make things worse for you. It's like your body has its own brain telling you stuff. It's like, there's times when I haven't listened, because you override it for a while, and then it finally raises its voice and says, hey, if you don't stop, I will break, and it'll be bad. And you're like, okay. So, but we really shouldn't get to that point, right?
Right.
So I've
told during practice, how many jumps would you do?
Man,
or like how long were your practices? Like my practice in college right now on a high jump day is no more than an hour.
Yeah. See,
like the warm up not included. Like I'll warm up for 20 minutes, but then the whole entire workout 90 minutes max.
Yeah. I think you're just smarter than me. So like I'm thinking back in high school, we just jumped because it was fun. And then, my high jump coach was the shot put disc guy, and he was also D-line coach. Coach, we called him, his name was Carl Halstead. He just passed away a couple of years ago. God bless you, coach. But he was this big buff dude, and he was always like, we would just go up and down the stairs. We had a great set of bleachers at Millikan High School in Long Beach. Go Rams, those of you listening out there. But he would have us jump up and down the bleachers, mostly up. We wouldn't do, coming down, but we would single leg up all the way up. So we did double legs, double leg skips, double leg skip 2 steps, that kind of stuff. Then single leg repeats all the way up. So my arm and knee drive action was always good. My legs was always strong. And then I don't remember him teaching us a lot of technique. I was very fortunate in that we just had a lot of good high jumpers, and we watched, but this is back in the age where you didn't see a lot of video. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have anything. I mean, if I saw jumping, it was like the Olympics, and the coverage has always been crappy. Let's just call it that here in the US. So see like one jump out of Dwight Stones, one jump out of Doug Nordquist. And this is 1984 when we had the games at home, almost nothing else. So it was, we're just learning by watching each other, and you'd see some people like, I can't watch that guy. That was terrible. And other guys, you'd be like, oh, dude, look, see that knee drive? Or you just start picking things up, So I'm thinking back as far as like organized practice or whatever, like I remember learning a couple drills from coach. We did one to get your knee drive to go across. I used to run straight at the bar, and then you have to drive your knee really hard to get your feet facing straight out the other way.
Yeah.
So I call that an overcompensation drill. And I use that to this day. It's been over 40 years since high school. And I still use that drill if I've got a kid who does not drive his knee across and drives it towards the pit. I'm like, hey, you got to get your knee up and across, dude. So here's the drill. It's like, it's always the first resort. I don't know what, I'm still trying to think of more drills for that, because that almost always gets it done. But we do
That's from like the center of the mat.
Yeah. Just run right.
You just start at the center and then just do it 180.
Yeah, you're just running, like me running at you, so I'm running this way, and you should plant your foot. Like, I'll let them cheat a little bit. Like, I like to see the heel to toe go from 6 to 12.
Okay.
You put it at 11. For me, I'm a left footer. So if you put it at 11 o'clock, maybe, and then your knee has really got to come all the way up and around and turn your back to the bar. So,
right.
Because usually we're perpendicular. So I go, I've added another 90 degrees to you, and you really got to bring your knee around, right? So it's an overcompensation drill, but if you can get to where you can get your feet pointing straight out, then it should be a piece of cake coming up, right?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, backovers, short approach. I think we did more full approach jumping back then because we just didn't know any better.
Yeah, I do so much short approach.
My little Romanian coach, I was blessed to work with Baru Elias, who I was at UCLA for 2 years with Dell and Lee. There's a 7.7 and 7.4 jumper, and I learned a lot from them. And then my 2 last years, I had Steve Lang was a coach up there. I did all the jumps. So I was learning from Steve. And then I found this little Romanian guy that was at one of the local JCs who had a really good reputation. And, I started working with him, and he's the one who got me to jump, 222 my senior year. And he taught me how to cycle when I run. He taught me to move farther away from the bar. But we always started backovers, 1, 3, 5. We would start close and work our way out. And then, very rarely did I do full approach jumps in practice. I don't really have my kids do much. I tend to be, I think sometimes like, it's like I'm in an episode of Star Wars, because he was my little Yoda. He was like 5'6". He wore specs. He's like, I am the great athlete. I am the guy. He goes, you beat the guy. And you're looking at this. He's 5'6", and I'm looking at him. He looks like a little soccer coach. He wore black socks and loafers. And you're looking at him going, this guy never did anything his entire life. I guarantee it. I was like, there's no way he was a high jumper or a long jumper, triple jumper. But at this school, well, he coached Brian Stanton, who jumped 7'8" and went to the Olympics in '88 in Seoul. I trained with Brian and Baru, obviously. And then he coached another guy named Dennis Lewis, who jumped 7'8.25", which was not a metric height. They measured it in feet and inches. And I forget the story behind that, but it had something to do with keeping an American record for another jumper. And but anyway, 7'8.25", 7'8". And I think I was the next one down the chain at 7'3", but he had great high jumpers. He had routinely 25, 26 foot, 27 foot long jumpers, and 52, 53, 55 foot triple jumpers. I mean, his cycling knowledge, plyometrics, everything was on point, so I don't remember thinking that there were any holes in what Elias would ask me to do. And I would usually I battled because a lot of times I didn't understand, what he was saying, because his accent was so thick. So when he was teaching me how to cycle and everything, I'd be like, you mean like this? He's like, no, like, and I'd get frustrated, but it would generally just it might be a little slower, but it would finally get through.
Right.
He taught me a lot of things that I still use to this day that I didn't even realize that I was learning at the time. One of them was, when your legs are tired, he would have me jump from the other side off my weak leg. You've never done that. I can highly recommend it, because I believe, and maybe I'm trying to, I don't know, glorify it or something, or justify it. But I remember thinking, why did he have me do that? Because when he asked me to do it, I did it, but I didn't just jump right in and go, oh, this is the greatest idea ever. I'm going, Elias, I don't jump off my right leg. I don't understand what we're doing this for. I griped like anybody else would. I'm like, I don't get it. Why are we doing this? And he's like, oh, go back up. Your legs, they're dead. You go, other leg, you know? And I'm like, all right, whatever, dude. And I jumped like 5'3" in practice.
Yeah.
And I'm already a 7'3" jumper. I'm like, what am I doing over here, Elias? This is a waste of time. And so I ended up jumping 5'3", and we went to some meet somewhere, and I had to have this meet. And it was like one of those all-comers meets where grannies are showing up in their walkers, you know, and everybody can jump, and the bar starts at like 4 feet, you know. And I'm sitting there in I still had some of my UCLA color stuff, and I'd already graduated, and I'm just sitting there going, this is going to take like 2 hours. So I'm bored out of my mind. I'm warmed up. I'm ready to go. And the bar's at 4 feet. And I said, well, I'm going to wait for them to get to 5. And they were going up in 3-inch increments, which was nice. It wouldn't take that long. But I go, you know what? I'll open up at 5 feet and I'll start off the other side. I'll jump on my right leg. Why not? You know, I've been training that way. So I went 5'3", 5 feet, 5'3", 5'6", 5'9". And this is one thing I tell people about adrenaline. I go, adrenaline's a wonderful thing when you're at a meet, because you'll start doing way better at all your drills because you've got a little juice, you know? So I went 5'9", 6 feet, 6'3", and damned if I didn't jump 6'6" off my weak leg that day. And I was like, when I looked back, and then as soon as I missed once at 6'9", I flipped over to the other side and went 6'9" and 7, and took good jumps at 7'3". And I was like, okay. I go, I can kind of see the value in this, in that, number one, that leg is fresh. The first time you ask it to high jump, it's going to go, how high do you want, man? Because I got all kinds of juice here. You never use me. You know, it's well rested. And so I believe there's a reverse processing thing too, that kind of like when you talk about people with different kinds of brains, like artists use more, there's one side of their brain than the other, whatever. So I'm like, maybe I'm using the artist side for me on this side, but it's like, it's learning things from a different angle, a different perspective, a different sequencing, you know, driving your regular knee, your regular jump leg up as your drive knee was a new experience. So, you know, but the concepts are the same. So there's something about learning how to do it from the other side. And I tell people this sometimes too. I go, you know, the interesting thing about that was when we were growing up, I was a definite left footer, you know, left foot on the ground. If I was going to kick anything, it was right footed. You know, I'm a right-handed whatever. And, you know, I remember I had a teammate who was a really good football player, baseball player, especially Tony Feliciano. Tony, if you're out there, probably wouldn't be listening to this, but he played at Long Beach State, which is more famous for baseball than anything else. And he was a lefty. And when we used to play, he had this beautiful, you know, perfect left-hander swing, would just kill the ball. And I remember, you know, like anybody else, I'd go, oh yeah, and I'd grab a bat left-handed and I'd like pop it or swing and miss it completely. And I'm like, I can't hit left-handed. You know, this is a mystery to me. I don't get it.
Yeah.
After doing that workout with Elias for, you know, this was a 4 or 5 week process or something. I can't remember, but I remember going and, you know, getting into the cage. And when, again, in college, after a couple of years of lifting, I felt like I was twice the athlete I was in high school. So, you know, from 6'3", 180 to 6'3", 195, being able to squat 400, bench 300, you know, and I was like, you know, a pretty big upper body now. I'm like, okay. And I got into the cage and I'm hitting right hand and I go, what about left? And I turned around like this and I go, and something just like, I go, oh yeah. First pitch was like, it's like, oh, I'm like, nice. You know, I was like, there was some kind of a relay that got switched over when Elias made me do things from the other side. So I'm just throwing that out. I don't have it backed by any kind of empirical data or research, but the same way that I like now, because of the knees over toes guy, and I was going to bring him up when you brought up your shin splints. If you don't follow him and do everything that he does.
I know him.
Especially for the tibialis bar and all that. And I would say, I don't know if he recommends doing it every day, but I would say every other day is fine. And get in the ice baths, you know, do all that stuff like you said, but I don't think you can do them too much unless it's the American too much, you know, literally 3 times a day for, you know, every day of the week. Yeah, that's probably too much. If you're doing the calf work, you know, he has you doing straight up and down, regular, stiff-legged calf work. Then you do the bent-legged calf work. Then you're doing the 2 legs like this, and then you're doing the singles. And again, singles are always harder than 2, but you do all that stuff, right? And then, you stand a decent chance. What was my point? I jumped off track because I wanted to get back to your other point, but the backward walking. You'll find I do this all the time. This will happen to you when you get older. So when I was walking, learning how to run from the other side, even the curve, I think, learning how to run a curve from the other side. I actually, at NC2A finals that year, 1986, we're in Indianapolis, and there's 23 jumpers there. 22 of them came from the right, including myself. There was one guy on the left when we're all doing run-throughs. And the 22 guys are all jostling for position and fighting each other and trying to get the run-throughs. And this guy's over here. There's a guy up there going, okay, you guys go, and then you guys go. And he was going left and right. Left, same guy. Left, same guy. It was like watching him doing his run-throughs. I'm like, he's getting a perfect warm-up. These guys are all getting intermittent run-throughs. And I said, you know what? I'm going to run my run-throughs from the other side. I just flipped it over to his side, did the same measurement, and ran it all the way through. And I go, okay, that's about right. And I trusted it, and it was fine. So I don't know if I would have been able to do that if Elias hadn't done, that thing in particular.
Right.
But the other thing I like is the whole idea of forward versus backwards, because I think just watching the knees over toes guy and the backward sled stuff.
Yep.
And I go, you realize that most of the time we are propelling ourselves forward, and we're leaning forward and we're pushing forward. And I always tell my jumpers, I go, when it comes to speed and everything else, and even hurdlers and everything, I go, it makes sense to be forward. But I said, in all the jumps, there's a part where you have to lean back a little bit at takeoff, either vertical or a little bit behind vertical, so that you can get some air.
Yeah.
So it's almost working against us to be leaning way forward. I'm always trying to coach guys out of forward. Like if we're doing one step away from the bar, what's the first move everybody does with one step away from the bar? Is they're standing back here, they drop down here and they bend that front leg and they go to power. And I'm like, all these films I'm watching of these European single armors, they're back here. And that leg is straight, boom, when they plant it. I'm like, what is this? Is completely wrong. So I'm like, when you go to run, it's paradoxical because I'm telling you to run as fast as you can. So you go, okay, drop down and push. And that makes sense if you're a sprinter. But I go, you're not a sprinter. I said, I can take sprinters and turn them into high jumpers, but I would still have to break them of all their habits and go, look, this kind of running that we do here is totally different in a lot of ways. It's way taller. You want to be taller. I still want to, if I want you to get smaller, I want you to get smaller by leaning left or right, not by bending that leg. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's interesting, but so back to your shins. Yeah, that, those tib bar stuff, the whole lower leg capsule. I love the Poliquin squats because you're talking about your knees. That's pure joint stability, right? I'm
not familiar with that.
The Poliquins are the ones that he shows when they're up on a plate or two.
Okay.
Do that one-legged.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Those are Poliquin squats. So they're almost like pistol squats, but you don't go all the way down.
You just like tap your heel, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, and you can raise the height up so that you're getting a little deeper. Right. But I would start shallow first and hammer those for a while. And then you can get deeper and you can eventually go pistols, if you've bulletproofed your knees, like he talks about, right?
Yeah.
And I do love that back thing that he does when he's just standing on both legs and he starts to fall back. If you've watched that, he can go all the way to the ground, hold his feet under him, lay back flat, which everything would shred itself if I did that. I would pull every muscle in my quads and my knees, right? Everything would just blow up. So I'm watching that in amazement, but then he comes all the way back up with no hands. I'm like, oh my God, I got to be able to do that, right? I'm going to be 60 in a couple months. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But
we do knee over toe rolls, and I have to do them assisted. Like we're not going all the way our back to the ground. We just do them just knee over toe, slowly go down and then come back up. And I can barely do that. So I can't even imagine doing what he does.
Have you seen the one where he puts, if you're butt yourself right up against the wall, fold your foot up behind you and put it on the wall. So you've got your knee on the ground and your foot is flat up like this, right? And automatically my face is almost in the ground because I have no flexibility. So you're set in this spot like this, And the idea is to be up here, all the way back, right
Yeah,
up, right. So you got to have like 2 ski poles in the ground to
right.
support you as you're slowly trying to work through that. I'm just like, oh my God, I hate this guy. He's flexible and powerful. And, you know, his
Yeah.
whole testimony was that he had like an 18-inch vertical in high school, blew
Yep.
out his ACL. And then whoever did his rehab was like, oh, we're working full range of motion and slowly, incrementally gaining strength, blah, blah, blah. And you watch him tomahawking and all this stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy. Good stuff out there, though. The internet and Instagram in particular for me has been, I wouldn't necessarily say an eye opener, but there are lots of things to learn. You know, I pick them up sometimes in the weirdest ways, but you know, most people would probably just go, what do you do on Instagram all the time? I'm like, well, to be honest, I've got stuff that I follow. All the hashtags are constantly on their way through. So if it's, you know, high jump, high jumper, this long jump, triple hitch kick, you know, all these different hashtags.
Yep.
That stuff comes through all the time. And then I'm following different trainers. So I watch, you know, Adonis Harrison or some of these guys that are, you know, explosive speed guys or plyo guys. I'm watching, you know, and when I see drills that I think are directly applicable, I just save them and stick them in my files. You know,
Yeah.
I've got huge stores of files of things that I know biomechanically are sound. I'm watching them. They're done in a good way. If they're done sloppy, I don't copy them. You know, if they're good,
Right.
then I don't have to film myself doing them later. If I show somebody I want them to do it, I just go, here you go, do it like this, you know. But that, and I look at someone like yourself and I see your feed, and I look through, you know, because if somebody follows me, I'm like, what are they following me for? It's not because I'm showing anything about me. I know that. Very rarely am I in any of my own videos. I'm showing somebody else, one of the athletes that I'm training, somebody else, because I'm always pimping for someone like yourself in the sport. I love to see the sport grow. I like to see high jumpers getting noticed more in particular. I like to get us more airtime. You know, I'm like, we've talked about this before when they film entire meets and then they say, oh, and here's the guy that won the high jump. You know, you get to see one jump. It's like, yeah, and I get to watch every lap of the men's 10,000. Thanks. You know,
I know.
like,
I hate that.
Let's put the high jumpers on, you know, long jump, pole vault. There's a lot of really interesting events. So, but I also look at what are they doing? Like you said, you mentioned Brandon Stark. I mean, great guy, not a gatekeeper. That guy is showing hurdle drills, run throughs, pop-ups, you know, plyos, explosive medicine ball tosses, and, you know, shot put in a big rock one time, you know, throwing it back over his head. And like you said, step ups, one-legged step ups, heavy weights. You know, I'm watching him. I'm like, you see him set the weights down for a second, he's hyperventilating. I'm like, yeah, he's working, you know. And then I remember watching his early stuff. He had a 16-step approach. I don't know if you broke down his early jumps, but, you know, he's way the hell back there. Like him and Bondarenko, I could never tell where Bondarenko starts. Usually you can see a guy
like always on the track.
Yeah, if you watch them, they chicken peck for a while, and then when they hit the mark, you can count. You know, Barshim does it. All those guys do it. Watching Bondarenko when he starts running, and he keeps running, and he keeps running, and all of a sudden he drops into his curve. I'm like, where the hell did he start? Like, I can't figure it out.
I don't understand how. Do you know why they like bound as part of their approach?
There's
like
only
it's
a
not
few
a normal
that do
run.
that.
Like I don't do that at all. I just
know,
run.
right? It's it depends. You know, Sotomayor did it. You know, Barshim doesn't, but Bondarenko does a tiny bit of it, and Derek Drown's approach in the Olympics in 2016. He had that power, but you also watch it and it's rhythmical and it's fast. I mean,
and then the last 5 are like super quick.
Yeah, he was really fast. Like I look at him and Bondarenko. Okay, usually when you see somebody rotate, you go, okay, they got this unbelievable layout and they're hitting their speed at the right time. They went from, I call it tall to small, right? You get totally stretched out at takeoff, and then you're pulling everything in. Your hands come back to your hips, your feet swing up, your head goes back. You get really tiny and you spin. Bondarenko and Drown both, they don't do any of that. They're just fast. And when they hit the takeoff position, you see them, they just kind of go like this. They reach the heels down a little bit, and they still they land around on their hands and feet almost like Barshim, like complete all the way around. I mean, Drown was almost landing on his hands and feet. So I was just like, you don't need outrageous flexibility. It can't hurt, but you don't need it to get great rotation. What you need is speed and the ability to wait, because I
Yeah.
know. I've been studying
That's
this for
like
a
my
long time. But
biggest
you
issue, I
start,
think.
what's that?
I think that's like my biggest issue, honestly, is like waiting or like staying away from the bar as long as possible.
Mm,
I
until
I
I
go
tell you,
like this. My head goes into the bar. Like,
I got an idea for
and
you.
sometimes it doesn't because I have visual checks. Like every meet, I'll be like, all right, when I get to my 5, I'm gonna look here. When I get to my penultimate step, I'm gonna look here. And
Right,
it keeps my head moving because my shoulders and my hips always follow my head. If I have a really good jump and I feel it right, it's because I went through all my checks and I was like, okay, duh, I'm in a good spot. Like I did everything
right.
I was supposed to do. But when I just like zone out and like power, tense up, like just try to
Yeah.
get over, it's always here
Yep.
in right into the bar. And the top of my back hits it. Like I could get high enough to clear the bar on my, like on my like highest point,
Right.
but I hit it on the way up.
Yeah. There's this is such an interesting topic because I've been going round and round about this for a couple of years because I had one kid in particular a couple of years ago. It's been 4 years now, 5 for Jack. Jack Weissman was a 6'6" jumper when I got him, and he should have gone to state already a couple of times, and he just couldn't get over the right heights at the right time. And then we started training, and I'm like, Jack, you're just too flipping close to the bar. You're right on top of the bar. So as you're starting your mechanics, your knee drive and everything comes around, and your brain is saying, I should leave this knee up and ride it, but you don't have time. You're
Right.
literally right on top of the bar. So your brain just says, hey, we got to ditch this knee and get the head back now. He had good flexibility in his upper back, but he would be in what I call this C position, right? Like this. I'm like, I want you here. I want you what I'm going to call the slinky position, where your head and your feet are on the same level and you're in this high arch like this. And if you let your head, you hold that position to where your head is just the tiniest bit lower than your feet, you're flipping around like a cat, just like
Right.
Bondarenko and those guys. I said, it doesn't have a lot to do with your flexibility or anything else. It has to do with timing. So I'm like, if you can hit vertical, go up, fall over towards horizontal, and then lay out, now you're going to be in this position much more likely than here. If I'm still on my way up and my head's already back, and you're talking about checking your visuals, this is a huge subject. I start throwing my head back on the way up. Well, my head is going back. It is going what I would say is horizontally to the ground.
Right.
I want my head going towards the ground so that my
Right.
hips come up, right? And that's all to do with timing. Because if everybody waits, you start, your head's back behind you, you go up and you fall all over. You watch Barshim, he's waiting till he's at about a 45.
Yeah.
He waits till he can see down the bar. You can see it. He's looking. And when he sees down the bar, it goes boom. Then his head goes
Yep.
back, his hands come to his hips, and he's in that position, right? And it all has to do with the visual checks. So you're bringing that up. I was just working with a young gal today, and I think she's going to be really, really good. But she's a 5'9", volleyball player already. And unfortunately, she's so talented that everybody's recruiting her. And I'm not going to be that guy that says, well, you can't do that. You have to stay with me. So I'm like, okay, we'll figure it out. She runs and, gets in this position already. And I'm like, look, and she did it today. She was doing just, I call them boomerangs. When you run your approach, I got to watch the great Doug Nordquist when he was at his peak, and he would run. This guy's a 6'5" antelope. He jumped 236. He jumped 7.83 And he, at 6'5", when he ran his curve, he looked like he's 4 feet tall. I mean, he was leaning so hard to his left and still cycling like crazy. And he'd go through and hit vertical, and you're like, oh man, now I totally understand the launch mechanics of the curve just adds to your own jumping ability.
Right.
Power jumpers don't get a lot of that because they're not leaning that much and they're not running that fast. So they're just strong. And a lot of times they got to really have good timing on top, because if you don't do your stuff right at the top, you're going to stall.
Right.
Get up there. So the speed jumpers kind of get that rotation going around, right? But Doug's coach, Alan Hankel, worked with me when I was 28. It was 92. I'm trying for my last trials. And he was the first one to introduce that concept of getting your eyes down to the far standard, because I'd been looking at the bar forever. And so I've been teaching that to the kids this last couple of years. I'm like, hey, these run-throughs, I'm getting these boomerang run-throughs. You just run in and come right back out. I'm like, I love them because they keep you on the curve as you're running through. And if you can execute your step count and hit, you can come up. But I'm like, the key is to stay over here. Because as soon as I look at the bar, like you said, head comes here and there you go. And I always tell the kids, I go, your head's a 16-pound bowling ball. It needs to be leaning away like everything else. As
Right.
soon as it starts to go across, you've started a chain reaction that's not going to stop right away. And if you can keep your eyes over there, like you said, you just mentioned your head staying with your shoulders. I talked about that today. I go, look, when I drive my knee, my body turns and my head stays looking straight ahead because that's the way it
Right.
usually works.
Yep.
But I said, you have to train your body to keep your eyes here as your body's turning and to stay here.
Yeah.
Because I have trouble. I've seen a lot of people just recently, and I see Dontavius gets away with it, where they go up and they throw their head back and to the other side. And he does actually a reverse
Yeah.
top of the
Yeah.
layout, which I haven't been able to figure out because I'm like, I would rather keep going the same direction or head straight back, but not back the other way, because then you introduce that shoulder twist. So unless you're already way past the bar when you do that, it can be trouble, you know. Wow. Well, hey, Aaron, I appreciate your time, man. I'm running up against a number crunch here because my wife and I are going to go see the UCLA game. But
No
I want to
worries, no.
reserve the ability for us to do this again. Maybe somewhere either in the middle or towards the end of your indoor. So we
Sure.
can check in then, find out
Yeah.
how you've been doing. And
Let's try to do it like in between indoor and outdoor. So I'll get done with indoor, and then I have like 2 weeks where I don't really do much.
nice. Yeah, change
So that'll
over.
be like late February, early March.
Perfect. Yeah. We'll reserve the date. I'll figure out, you figured out when it is and let me know. And
Yeah.
then, we'll play the same game we did on arranging, a good hour or whatever.
Yep.
Weekend might be harder then because we'll both be getting into where Saturdays are more meet days, but
Yeah.
Sundays are almost always good too. So,
Gotcha.
all right. Hey, dude, too much fun. This like that hour just went like that for me. Really appreciate
Absolutely.
you, man. I'm your biggest fan. Great luck indoors. Don't be
Thank you.
afraid. I will shamelessly pimp for you. Send me videos. Just say, hey, this was me jumping, 205 this weekend. It goes right up. So, you know what I'm saying?
Sounds good. Well, hey, thank you for letting me get on here. It was great meeting you, and yeah, look forward to having it again in the future.
Yep. Let's do it. All right. Thanks, Aaron. Have a
All
good
right,
one, bud.
have a good one. See ya.
Yep. And there you heard it. We have just finished up with Aaron Sanchez. He's a junior. He's at a college in Pennsylvania, and it's a D2 school. And he's training away, getting ready for his indoor season, which is going to be coming up here pretty quick. It'll be ending in February. And then he will continue on and do his outdoor season. He's a 6 3/4, 2-meter guy. He was only jumping 6'1" in high school, and he managed to get himself into a college that would take him, and has continued to work his craft and get better and better at what he does. He's only 5'11", but he's jumping way over his head. He's getting stronger, and he's fighting a lot of the same battles that we've all fought. If you're a high jumper in particular, with shin splints and all that. So wishing him the best as he gets forward. And that will wrap it up here on Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haines. Thanks for joining us. This was Saturday, November 11th, Veterans Day. And for you out there that are veterans and who are sons and daughters of veterans, thank you and thank them for their service. My grandfather, who's been gone for a while now, was a pilot in World War II and flew all of his missions over Germany. And Gramps, thinking about you today. So there you have it. Thank you to the veterans. And we will be back here soon sharing more jumpers and trainers and coaches and theories and all kinds of stuff to help you raise the bar as you continue on your journey to high jumping, long jumping, triple jumping, pole vaulting, any of those. All right. Until then. All right. Signing off, Troy Haines.